is just a makeshift protest. So this is one of the ICE vehicles here. They were walking back to their cars. Now, one of the agents you can see just getting out of the car, trying to get a hold of one of the other ones. People are pounding on the windows of the car. Whether anyone is inside or whether anyone has been arrested is unclear. Again, people are just stopping traffic, standing in front of the ICE agents, yelling racial slurs. You can see this woman over here is blocking traffic. I've got to move so I don't get hit. There are people here, the ICE agents are trying to get out, and come with me here, Greg, they're not letting them leave. So it's unclear whether people are even inside the vehicle aside from these agents, but these women aren't letting them go anywhere. And at the risk of sounding sympathetic, they're yelling, they're pushing the agents, and the minute that the agents move somebody, that's when these people get thrown to the ground and tensions flare and escalate.
Hey, knock knock, Zohran Mamdani, you know who that is? It is ICE, who is apparently now conducting operations in his city just about 2 weeks before the New York mayoral election, and you certainly love to see that. And they're going to need training, after all, for when his mayorship begins here very soon. But in today's video, I do want to tell you about the rather chaotic situation that unfolded in Chinatown today after what started as and should have been a fairly standard and minor ICE operation quickly turned into basically a riot after we know the nature of the left and their political coalition is to, of course, constantly defend by any means necessary their comrades that include violent criminals, illegal aliens, narco-terrorists, it turns out money launderers as well, and many other such wonderful members of society. And essentially what happened here is that ICE did a raid on Canal Street. For those of you who don't know, this is basically a massive area for illegal vendors who are selling things like counterfeit goods, fake designer bags, that type of stuff, right? Really just, obviously America needs this, right? What would America do without the illegal immigrant labor that's selling fake designer, you know? But apparently, as a result of that, right, literally, they just cracked down. Apparently, they arrested about 4 illegal aliens who were working those streets. This is the scene in New York City, which I have to say really does tell you something interesting, right? You do something as minor as arrest a bunch of illegal street vendors who are selling fake designer bags, and suddenly a certain subset of American population just starts rioting. They just get violently angry over it. I don't know. I'm just saying, you know, it's kind of strange, is it not? Is that not just a little bit interesting? But nonetheless, we'll tell you about the situation in today's video, as well as give you some updates apparently on what Zohran is saying about it, as well as the greater picture here in the New York City mayoral race. Because when we talk about things, for instance, like ICE in New York City, and then you look at the polls in terms of American-born versus foreign-born New Yorkers, it's like, yeah, maybe we need to have a conversation on immigration that is very wide-reaching and perhaps even bigger than the simple issue of like closing the border or deporting illegals or something like that. But we'll get into it, guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work and ensure that we can keep doing these videos. And that said, well, let's just take a listen here to the local news, kind of explain for you the basic details, and then I will show you some of the scenes of the civil unrest, because again, they're this mad that we're taking away the fake Gucci bags, guys. Okay. All right, take a listen.
Well, more on those stories in just a minute, but we're going to begin with some breaking news that we have been following this afternoon. Federal agents started a crackdown on illegal vendors in Chinatown.
And the raid by the federal agents and the vendors who are regularly on the streets of New York, leading to a rather tense situation. Eyewitness News reporter Lucy Yang at this disturbing scene in Chinatown for us. Lucy.
Well, Bill and Liz, it was a very heated situation here in Chinatown this afternoon as federal agents swooped in, as crowds got involved and as tempers flared. We were in the thick of the scrum as law enforcement tried to engage in what they are calling an ongoing federal investigation. We're told agents are part of a joint immigration and customs enforcement crackdown. Vendors tell me they were asked for passports or proof of residency today. Normally, Canal Street is full of street vendors selling all sorts of fake designer goods. But it looks like today was not about the merchandise, but about the people operating those street sales. The situation quickly got heated when bystanders joined in and started pushing back on the officers. There was shoving, there was cursing. I saw a woman banging on an official car, then thrown to the ground and taken into custody.
You can't even make that up, right? This is the greatest caricature of the people that comprise the left-wing coalition in America. You're taking away illegal street vendors of fake designer bags? We no more ICE. No more what? You know, it's so ridiculous. It's no different than, you also notice too, the ICE raids they get the most mad about is very telling. They claim, it's inappropriate to say the left-wing coalition is full of criminals. But okay, so earlier this year, when they did an ICE raid at a marijuana farm, you guys might remember, in Southern California, and this was, by the way, an extremely shady farm. Apparently, they were full of illegals. They were employing migrant labor and child labor and all that stuff. A riot broke out, and it got pretty violent. If I'm not mistaken, I think one person even tried to shoot at ICE, and, it's actually one of the first cases of documented violence. And it's like, what was the left defending there? The weed, and then the Democrat senators went out and said, they're stealing our food. It's like, oh, is that all you eat all day? You just eat edibles all day? And then the same case here. Right? It's so ridiculous. And, here's the thing. It does appear like it was a targeted ICE raid, I would guess, right? Because they didn't go check all the illegal vendors. I'm sure you could find much more. But if I were to make a prediction on this, it's probably the case that a couple, at least, of these vendors are believed to be engaged in things like money laundering. They're certainly not paying taxes. I mean, we almost know that for a fact. And, as usual, these people who have no idea what they're doing, right? They have no idea what the actual illegals are being accused of. After all, for all we know, they could be murderers. But still, right, this is the scene where they're going to protest on these people's behalf, which really is not much of a surprise. I mean, we remember Kilmar Abrego Garcia. We remember the situation on the weed farm. And here they go, okay, defending their fake Gucci to the death, apparently. Right, and this is the situation as NYPD comes in and basically tries to back them out, back up ICE and kind of bail out what's happening here. Complete, guys, all this over some counterfeit bags. Now, take a look at this as well, because this is the moment where the protesters try to block the ICE vehicle and NYPD has to come and basically clear out the protesters, which there's an important point to be made about that in a second. But first, just check this out. Yeah, so here's the really important thing to notice about that video, is that the NYPD are actually helping. They're clearing the way for the ICE agents. This is a total 180 from what you've seen in Portland, for example. And while I won't exactly say that the NYPD are doing a fantastic job of crowd control, at least they're trying to do crowd control, okay? Sure, they don't have the riot gear out there, but they're actually pushing people back, which is significant. And why is that? It is, of course, because Eric Adams, the current mayor of New York City, basically ever since Biden threw that indictment at him because he was critical of the migrant crisis, has fully said, I'm going to cooperate with Trump. NYPD is not going to practice a sanctuary city policy. And so I guess in that regard, credit where it's due. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But last thing I want to bring up about this Canal Street situation is that just, in fact, 2 days ago, one of my friends, Savannah Hernandez, she works for Turning Point, actually did an on-the-ground report on apparently what is going on there with clear illegal alien street vendors from, apparently Senegal now are operating a black market openly on the corner of Broadway and Canal Street in New York City. So, keep in mind, this is Chinatown, but these people don't really seem to be Chinese, whether that's the street vendors or the protesters themselves. But, take a listen.
This is Savannah Hernandez in New York City, and okay, my friends, I was just driving down the street, I was Ubering, and I saw this huge market of African migrants selling all of these bags along this sidewalk. The sidewalk was actually completely full of people, so I was like, okay, pull over, let me see what's going on. Now, I'm walking along this street, and the entire sidewalk was completely packed with people buying these Louis Vuitton bags, buying these YSL bags. Obviously, all of them are knockoffs. Now, I spoke to some of the migrants. They were telling me they're all from Senegal. And as I'm walking around, they all start grabbing their bags very quickly. Again, this entire block was filled with all of these bags. And they picked them all up very quickly. Within 2 minutes, they all started jumping in vehicles, running away. I was speaking to one of the migrants, and he ended up telling me that they don't have the license to sell these purses. It's illegal, and if the cops catch them, they will come and take away all of their products. Another thing that I noticed too, because I was filming, is these migrants, very similar to Paris, telling me that I can't film here.
Hey, you do the film here.
And that I wasn't allowed to be, using my camera. So they're being a little bit of aggressive toward me, and it just looked just like Paris. I was just in Paris, a month ago, and it looks the exact same here on the streets of New York as it did over there. Again, I've just never seen this. Maybe this is a common thing, but again, the entire sidewalk was completely filled with these knockoff fake purses. And then as soon as they thought the cops were going to come, they all just took off running. Craziest thing I've ever seen.
And that's accurate, by the way. I was in Europe as well over the summer. I can tell you this is a huge thing. These like weird illegal street vendors who you have to question how they even got in the country to begin with. But we know all about the Biden administration, in this country at least. And again, I reiterate, okay, this is what they're protesting about. This is what they're mad about. Again, they're mad because this open air illegal market, which, not only, I'm not here to like be, oh no, the designer bags are fake, that's undercutting American business or something, but it's honestly, my biggest problem with it is more so the problem of that they're blocking the sidewalk, right? They're making the place essentially like third world, because in the first world, you have to actually have a license and a permit and a storefront, and you can't just like obstruct the sidewalk and sell crap wherever you want. And then, by the way, in the process, take business away from the actual people in front of you who pay rent and all of that. And again, like, what are they contributing to society? We're so often told, oh, we need the illegal aliens because they're working the jobs that the Americans won't work. Oh, you mean like selling like illegal counterfeit goods in the streets like this? Like it's a, open air market of Somalia or something. Oh, our country is so screwed without this. I mean, that's just horrible. The prospect that we might not have that. But yeah, again, so you can clearly see the proof. There was plenty of cause for ICE to do this raid. Okay, they should have done it sooner, frankly. And by the way, I fully assume the reason they're doing this is because it's pretty clearly a criminal enterprise on many different levels. But not only are people protesting over they design bags out in the streets, but apparently as well, let's talk about Zohran Mamdani, who's responding to the situation, stating that federal agents from ICE and HSI, some in military fatigues en masse, descended on Chinatown today. Again, yeah, definitely Chinatown here. Real full of, they attacked the Chinese people, guys. Okay. An aggressive and reckless raid on immigrant street vendors. That's all they are. They're immigrant street vendors, Let's conflate them in the same camp as like the New York City hot dog. Yeah, definitely, right? Okay. Anyways, once again, the Trump administration chooses authoritarian theatrics that create fear, not safety. It must stop. Oh, yeah, because this situation where they're threatening people who film them and then running away from the cops every time they hear sirens, yeah, that definitely does not create fear, guys. But cracking down on this and saying we're actually going to be a first world country who's not going to sell a bunch of illegal crap in the open air out in the streets, that's horrible. But of course, knowing Zohran Mamdani, I mean, that's probably his biggest problem with it, right? Is how dare you, like, make America a nice place? How dare you kind of assert that, oh, like this is a first world country, you're not going to engage in this behavior? We know the story there. And guys, here's the thing. Here's the biggest contrast, frankly, between say Eric Adams, who's not a fantastic mayor, but at least he allows the NYPD to respond to like that civil unrest. Because if they're not going to crack down on the open air market, at least help ICE out when they crack down on it, right? And Zohran Mamdani. Because Zohran Mamdani obviously fully is fine with the situation you saw earlier today out in the streets of that city, and has even spoken about using the city government not to like hold back the crowd, but to cheer on the crowd, right? You think Portland is bad right now? Wait till you see New York City. And here he was just recently talking about apparently how he wants to create a underground railroad that's going to hide illegal migrants from ICE. So you hear that, Senegalese street vendors? No longer will you have to flee from the police right like this, because the police will be helping you. According to Zohran Mamdani, take a listen.
He decided he would put her TPS order before the deportation order. For a minute, it seemed as if the danger had passed. But the pastor knew that ICE stood outside. They did not care about a court order, because they do not care about the rule of law. He turned to a few court watchers in the room and asked them to go outside first. He asked another man to hold the elevator. He picked up the young woman under her arms, opened the doors, rushed her past ICE agents, into the elevator and down into a waiting car before speeding off back to Brooklyn. Through it all, her feet had never even touched the ground. He told me that it felt like the Underground Railroad. And still he knew she was anything but safe. We are living in the times that we read about. I know that for many of us, when we look back at moments in history that rhyme with today, where tyranny loomed and the state imposed violence with sinister glee, we ask ourselves what we would have done. We need not wonder. That time is now.
Yeah, so again, there you just heard Zohran Mamdani actually just openly celebrating someone who broke the law and essentially helped a fugitive escape from law enforcement. And then what did the crowd do? They all cheered. They said it's like the Underground Railroad. Yay! And then he, of course, compares the situation to, say, slavery or the Civil War, which seems to be the implication, or perhaps the rise of Nazi Germany, which, as I so often bring up on the front of stochastic terrorism, okay, so what is the implication of that? If we're living in those times, as he says, right, not it's something like those times, or we should be inspired by them, or something, no, like, directly we're living in that type of country, right? It's a Nazi takeover or it's slavery, then, you know, what's the justification for that, right? What is the reasonable response to that according to the leftists? Is it not a call for violence? Is it not to say that, say terrorist attacks against ICE are justified? Because, these same people, they constantly celebrate, say, like John Brown or individuals like that. You see a lot of glorification of that guy within left-wing circles. And why is that? Simply because they want an excuse as well to say, oh, let me be a terrorist who goes and kills a bunch of civilians. And then the left wing will apparently justify that because according to them, again, we live in authoritarian times, and that's why we should absolutely celebrate a fugitive being harbored from law enforcement. And this guy is, again, running for the mayor of New York City, ladies and gentlemen. Yep, that is right. Now, last thing I want to quickly bring up is the actual picture currently in this election, because it does tell you a lot. So, I don't think it's exactly reinventing news to tell you that Zohran Mamdani is currently on pace to win the mayorship, somewhere in the margin between maybe 40 to 50 or so percent. While the vote is split, I have made the case as of late. I think actually that Andrew Cuomo would not win anyway because he's that bad of a candidate. But that said, look at this poll right here, okay? And this will tell you a lot. So here we have 2025 New York mayoral election. Among American-born, right, native-born people born in this country, among those New Yorkers, Andrew Cuomo has a 40% margin, right? He actually leads Zohran Mamdani. So Andrew Cuomo, 40%, Zohran Mamdani, 31%, Curtis Sliwa, 25%. Curtis is the Republican, for those of you who don't know. Yet among foreign-born New Yorkers, people who are immigrants, people who are not born in this country, and keep in mind, in this case, we're talking about legal American citizens, but those who are naturalized from other countries. Among them, Zohran Mamdani has 62%, Andrew Cuomo 24%, and Curtis Sliwa 12%. By the way, when people want to ask the question, how exactly is Mamdani so popular in New York City? Well, that is, of course, closely connected to the fact that the foreign-born population of New York City is around 40% of the city. And that's just the citizens, right? That's not counting, for instance, the illegal aliens, the green card holders, the kind of temporary residents, whatever, people who are here on a work visa, student visa. So when you add all of that up, you're basically talking about a city that is about 50 or maybe more percent of the residents there are not born in the United States. And then you correlate that and it's like, oh, that's the reason why Mamdani's running up the freaking margins, you know? So look, you want the explanation for everything going on right now in New York City, and frankly, I'd argue, honestly, a lot of America. There's your answer. And look, this might be a hot take to say, so, you know, understand when I bring this up, I'm not trying to single anyone out personally. I'm making a broad societal argument here. You can literally not have a country when 50% of the country is not born in that country, is foreign born. Okay, that's just like insane. There's no way that a society can remain stable, unified, cohesive, anything, when literally half the population is from somewhere else, okay? That's not to say that a society can integrate absolutely no immigrants, right? Because some people are going to say, oh, well, I'm fine with legal immigration as long as people assimilate into American culture and respect our norms. But understand that a pretty basic prerequisite for assimilation is that the person has to actually like come into a society that is dominated by the native population, right? You come in and you're like the only immigrant in that town and you kind of have a foreign culture and you got to adapt to the rest of everyone else, then yeah, naturally you're going to assimilate. But when you come in and you're half the community, who do you think's going to be in charge there? Why would you have any reason to integrate or assimilate into anything American when you can just live basically in an ethnic enclave that resembles the country that all those people came from? And then over time, right, when you pass 51%, what are you assimilating to? You're the majority now at this point. And that's the thing about New York City, right? As I pointed out here, how should this not be concerning to any country, right? How can society in general remain stable under these circumstances? It's actually crazy. You know, and again, I repeat, this is not just about illegal immigration, although that's a component certainly of destabilizing society. A lot of the legal immigration system is also further to blame for this because, again, you're talking about you brought in so many people overall that half the city is not native born. And, you know, it's interesting, like when you point this out, even a lot of people on the right who are like immigrants will get in their feelings about it. They'll say like, oh, well, I'm a naturalized immigrant and I'm a patriotic American, or I know people like that and they're perfectly fine and they would never vote for Zohran. But again, I'm saying like, it's not about you. We're not talking about anything anecdotal. I'm not singling anyone out. What I'm saying, again, on a broad societal perspective, that again, it's not to say individual people can't assimilate, because obviously they can, right? I mean, I was born in this country, but you could argue because, you know, some of my family, not all of them, by the way, but some of them are more recent immigrants, that's kind of a case of assimilation working or something like that. But again, what we're talking about is the fact that like when half the country or half a city is not native born, there is not going to be assimilation. And it should not surprise you that someone like Zohran Mamdani, who people are like, this guy just got here he just got naturalized like 5 years ago as a citizen, and he's like totally antithetical to everything we thought like America's supposed to stand for. Well, there you go, right? There's your answer. And this, by the way, hopefully this election, one takeaway for like conservatives or Republicans or just normal people in this country should be, not only do we need to close the border to illegal immigration, we probably need to reduce legal immigration as well, right? Not saying even get rid of all of it, but again, like when you're bringing in people at such a rate where 50% of your most major city are all like not born in this country, that's a problem. That's a serious problem. And no, you absolutely cannot expect everyone again to integrate into American values when they're the majority of the people. No, if anything, the Americans are gonna have to integrate to them. And then what happens? That's a problem, right? So, you know, hot take maybe, but I'm sorry, it's just the honest truth, okay? And again, that's not an attack on anyone who individually is an immigrant or, you know, conservative people who are immigrants. I'm just saying we also need to understand the reality of like the law of averages and what happens en masse when you adopt broad societal policies. And this is a prime example of that, right? And of course, at the same time, people are trying to blame what is currently going on Curtis Sliwa. By the way, I used to be in this camp, to be honest with you, right? The campaign to get the Republican in this race to drop out, saying, oh, well, if you drop out, you'll put your support behind Cuomo and then we can beat Mamdani. But I like to point out, right, you look at the recent polls, that is far from guaranteed, right? Because first of all, I'd like to point out Andrew Cuomo, terrible candidate to begin with. He has massive scandals. And by the way, on the front of his campaign is not even running a campaign. He's barely trying. So yes, while in theory, if Sliwa put his support behind Cuomo, that should create enough mathematical support to get Cuomo to beat Mamdani. In reality, that wouldn't be the case because there's that much people out there who simply don't like Cuomo, right? If anything, Cuomo actually has a pretty low ceiling, and one could make the case the opposite should be happening, right? Maybe Cuomo should drop out to endorse Sliwa because after all, Cuomo already lost the freaking primary for a reason. Again, he's not a good candidate. Maybe Sliwa head to head, I don't know, like if he had more time in this race would have been a better matchup for Mamdani. I mean, honestly, who knows on that front? But, this is something even Trump pointed out as well today, which is like, yeah, it's actually, when you really break it down, not even the fault of Curtis Sliwa. I have personally changed my mind on that, like full disclaimer. I used to be on the other side of this, but no, it's very obvious, right? It has nothing to do with Curtis Sliwa or anything else. It's, again, Cuomo running a terrible campaign, and he shouldn't even be in this race to begin with. But also, secondly, the very phenomenon we just talked about in terms of, what's happening to this country. But just saying.
If he dropped out, he's not going to win. And not looking too good for Cuomo either. But maybe, I don't know, if he dropped out, maybe Cuomo would have a little bit of a chance, but not much. Because it looks like the lead it's not a great lead, but it's big enough that he should be able to win. So, I don't know that I want to get involved. It's really a question of, would I rather have a Democrat or a communist? And I would rather have a Democrat than a communist. It's a big statement.
Yeah, well, there you go. Again, New York City is screwed and stuck with Zohran Mamdani for those two reasons. Number one, Andrew Cuomo, terrible candidate, running a terrible campaign. Is he even campaigning? Is he even trying? Frankly, he ought to be blamed a lot for actually allowing Mamdani to win with how piss poor his attempt at even trying to win a single vote has been in that election. But then secondly is this thing right here, right? I don't think that should be actually underestimated because even with his pathetic campaign, Andrew Cuomo would still be winning. And Curtis Sliwa would actually have a chance, right, of maybe doing something if it was only native-born citizens voting. But because obviously that's not the case, enjoy Mayor Mamdani, it would appear, unless something crazy happens within a couple of weeks. But that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.